Well, hi again, and welcome to The Way I Do It. You see behind me is my Hesston 1120 haybine. The Hesston 1120 is exactly the same mower as the Case International 8330. I believe they were made in the 80s for about 10 to 15 years. Many people believe this is the best sickle type mower conditioner that was ever produced. The bar cut's really easy, and the rollers do a very good job of conditioning because I believe it's a rubber on metal. Minimum horsepower required is only 30 horsepower to operate it. Although I could tell you that it does pull kind of hard because it's quite heavy. So what's on the agenda today? Well, I bought this used and I traveled over 100 miles to get it, and it looked fine. Paid a fair price. So I got a good deal on this when I drove down past Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania to pick this up. The first thing I had to do is replace this part of the cutting actuator. The bearing in the middle was shot, so I got a new one of those. At the time, I think it was just over $100. The trouble's compound, so I had actually considered replacing other parts and paused and put the thing back together, and I guess I left a bolt loose. And this is a result of my bolt being loose, although I'm not going to claim complete responsibility, because if you see how this is made, this is actually a nut welded onto here, and there's some sort of odd seam, and the thickness is a little different than the other ones. Something here is different. So this has been damaged before, and it was probably replaced with one made out of hot rolled steel or something. Well, that's not the only problem. Yeah, that was another loose bolt. So what I've got going on here, and it's the same on the opposite side. So I looked at Messick's, and sure, they can provide this. They only show one though, so I guess this is the back side that's threaded. So I guess you have to drill the holes out to get a front side. So you take one of those. But this little baby is $100 plus shipping. Yeah, folks, $100 plus shipping. Now, it's most likely forged and tapped. But I'll tell you what, that thing has got to be $5 or less to make. You just keep compounding all the hands it passes through. Messick's alone probably makes, if it's $100, they've got to be making at least $30 on it. And they're buying it from a wholesaler, who in turn is probably making half. So if Messick's is making 30, the wholesaler's probably making 35. So, I digress. So I'm going to make my own. And on this, what my plan is here is to cut this out, make a new one. And I'm going to also cut this out, make a new one. Look through my garage. I got this piece of cold rolled steel, which is nice and thick. That can be drilled and then welded in place. And then I've got this piece that I found. Again, it looks like cold rolled steel, so it's going to be stronger. And I can make this piece out of it. Now, it's going on the front, so I got plenty of clearance there, so I'll just use it at full thickness. And like the other one, I'll find some bushings that'll go on like that. Yeah. So let's see where we can go, and I'll film as much. All right, let me show you where we're at before I get too far along. So I cut out the damaged pieces here, and then up inside here I cut out this damaged section, and I found a piece of cold rolled steel that's about 1 inch thick that'll work very nicely to go in that gap. So I scribed out that with chalk and just cut it out with a torch. Now, yeah, I'm going to have to fill the gap, but I'm doing stick welding and it should work out just fine. Making a larger hole than just trying to fill it in and drill a hole is much more effective because it gives a lot more surface there to make that connection. So let me get this welded in and I'll show you in the next piece. Okay, so there's the next step. Okay, this is some cold rolled steel. What is it, 1/2 inch thick? And I cut it to match what was in here. I left a notch out here for this adjustment. This is like 3 passes. This is 7018, a positive electrode. So now the only part left is to replace that and get her back together. Well, we rolled over into the next day. Here's where we're at. It's 9 o'clock in the morning, so I got a bit of a shadow here, but maybe you can see. A little grinder and paint makes me the welder I ain't, but yeah, I think I'm a good welder. That ain't going anywhere. Again, that's 3 passes, I think I just said. This looks kind of porous here, but it's going to do the job. You can't really see. So, next thing is I have to replace one of the links on the bottom. So, this link is the one that was on the back side of the failed link. So I had to straighten it. I got it pretty flat. And then I cleaned up this face. I chased out the threads. And this actually, it goes down here like that. It goes behind there. Okay, for the broken link, which was this. Okay. What I did is I had this piece of cold rolled steel and I took the other front link that has through holes and not threads. I set it on there, loosely traced the outside, cut it with a torch, and then ground it to get it relatively smooth. Then I didn't have a way to make these bosses, so what I did is I stacked the washers and I brazed them. This is going to have to be cleaned up a little bit for it to go in the relief. Okay, it's got to go down, it's got to fit down in this hole. But that'll work fine. You can see on this one they used a nut. It looks like they, I don't know, MIG welded it on here. But I'm not real happy with the idea of a nut because the contact area is very small and a lot of nuts tend to be relatively soft. So I used these washers, stacked them up and brazed them. And then I'll just clean it up, get in there with my angle grinder. Grinder and paint, make sure the welder you ain't. Another thing I had to do is come up with a bushing to go inside the bearing. This bushing here is an original one. These two I made. I found a piece of tubing. This is slightly smaller. I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 thousandths smaller, so it will have a bit of a gap. And I actually cut it off with a grinder and had to drill it to fit over the 1/2 inch bolt, but it'll be better than nothing. When I replaced this a couple years ago, I didn't have the bushing and I really didn't have any ill effects from it, so I think I'll be okay with what I put in there. So going from no bushing there to bushings will be a good thing. This piece is a little different story. I took the bushing out of one side of it, okay, but the other side that had come loose, the bushing was just all beat to crap. And the bushing that's in there now, in the new bearing, I actually found a piece of aluminum that would fit. I had to take about 10 thousandths off the outside of it. Did that in my drill press with a file. And then I drilled the inside to the 1/2 inch that I needed. And then I was able to drive it into that bearing race. You can see on this old bearing that it had that bushing in there. And this one just got all beat up, so it wasn't really worth taking out because it was loose. Now, ideally, if it's tight, the bushing shouldn't matter. It shouldn't carry load on that bushing, but it's good. Well, I think we're done. So we got all the good stuff on. We got our fun paint, a little spray bomb on there to make it look good. And I think we're good to go. And again, this is what it looked like. Right here, this was the plate that was in the front. Right there. So yeah, it's probably really appreciating it, and I bet it's going to cut well. I did check it out, make sure all the geometry is correct, and it's good to go. Got everything good and tight. Tighten the chains, and we're ready to cut hay again. So yeah, I want to thank you for watching. Remember, a grinder and paint make you the welder you ain't. And that's the way I do it.